We are very happy to welcome you to this special pre-program that we began last year, which is a panel discussion with several of our award winners. The reason that we put together this panel is, as you'll see during the ceremony, and I hope that you'll be able to stay for that, is you'll hear a little bit of information from our award winners, but of course we do keep the time frame very succinct. And so this is an opportunity for you to hear more information from them about the impact of the award, why they felt their project was important, as well as the meaning to them and their community over time. And this particular year is very special for us as the 25th anniversary of the Driehaus Foundation Preservation Awards. We wanted to reflect back on the meaning, the significance, the impact of receiving these awards in their communities. And so we've asked 4 of our previous award winners to join us today to give that reflection. And so I'm pleased to introduce them. And my introduction, by the way, I'm Bonnie McDonald, the President and CEO of Landmarks Illinois, and we are so glad to have you here at the Spertus Institute with us, and hope that you'll also come back for the awards right after our reception. I'm going to start off on your far right with Gail White, who is the partner and principal with White and Borgognoni, which is located in Carbondale. This is an architecture firm, and as you'll see, Gail received an award in 1998, our Founders Award. So Gail will be talking about the work that he does all across the state, and I would like to tell you, everyone that you see on the stage tonight is either a current or former board member of Landmarks Illinois as well. So welcome back, Gail. Next to him is Michael Rachlis, and Michael is a partner and attorney with Rachlis, Durham, Duff, and Peel, which is a legal firm here in Chicago that does a significant amount of regulatory preservation work for us. And Michael has been an indispensable resource for us as we have looked at regulatory issues with historic preservation projects, and we are indebted to him and very glad to welcome him back. And as you can see, Michael received our 2000 President's Award for this work that he has done. Next to Michael is Katie Kim, who is the CEO of the Kim Group, which is located in Peoria. Katie is a sitting board member right now. We're so pleased to have her representing Central Illinois on our board. And as you'll see, Katie is a force to be reckoned with. We have taken our board to visit her in Peoria and to see the voluminous project that she is involved in. And she is a representative of her community in multiple ways, not only on our board. And Katie is a recent award winner. As you'll see, just last year, she received an award in 2017 for the adaptive reuse of a project, the Cooperage 214, which was an adaptive reuse project in the Peoria Warehouse District. And last but not least, our moderator, who many of you probably know, Joe Antunovich, who is the founder and principal of Antunovich Associates, which is an architect firm here in Chicago that works all over the nation. Joe Antunovich is one of our longest serving board members. He is a current board member as well. And as you can see, he received our 1996 President's Award because he actually served as the board president. And one of his accomplishments, crowning achievements, was saving the Farnsworth House with Landmarks Illinois, the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And in fact, he just on Thursday received an award for lifetime achievement from the Richard H. Driehaus Museum. So would you please welcome our panelists, and thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. I should hire her as my PR agent. We're going to keep this light and with this august panel here. I'm thrilled that we're here attending an event that's named after Richard Driehaus, somebody that's such a steward of so many beautiful buildings here in Illinois, a steward of beautiful things. He's got 55 of the most gorgeous cars you could imagine in America, but he can't drive. He doesn't have a license. I always thought that to be a little bit humorous myself. But his stewardship over the buildings that he has restored and continues to keep the maintenance up, and basically he's taking care of these buildings for the next generations, and it's so noble. I'd like to start off by perhaps having each of you just talk about yourselves individually and what you feel about how this award, how the impact of preservation and what a difference it's made in the communities that you practice in and work in. So perhaps, Katie, you could start us off.
Sure, I'd love to. We received the award for Cooperage 214, which is located in Peoria's warehouse district. It was a building that we walked into. It was towards the end of our district, which many people said it was too far and that we needed to kind of pick a building closer to the center of the city. We really wanted to bookend in the district, and so we walked into it, and beautiful old warehouse, just needed a little bit of love, and
Who told you it was too far? I want to know.
Oh, everyone. The city did. You know, a lot of the bankers told us it was too far.
Oh, the bankers.
Oh, the bankers, yeah. We actually went through a couple different banks because they, in Peoria, we were just got the River's Edge district, and we were just starting the historical renovation with the state and the federal tax credits. And so a lot of our local banks didn't know how to fund the projects. And so we did a lot of sessions with banks, teaching them about the structure. We brought in a lot of consultants to help them learn how to get the capital stack and to set up the projects. So it was a learning experience and kind of pushing everything uphill the whole way in that sense, absolutely.
But
So.
that project was really the cornerstone of a lot of preservation work in Peoria. So in a way that led towards other projects, subsequent projects in Peoria.
Absolutely, absolutely. We, Cooperage 214, and I like to brand on my projects, and we found out through our due diligence of the history of the project that there's actually a lawsuit. The building used to be a Cooperage. It used to make barrels for Hiram Walker. They used to have their headquarters in Peoria. And we found
What was that, Hiram Walker?
Mm-hmm.
Barrels of Hiram Walker. Okay.
And so they didn't extract from the barrel properly, and then they sold the barrel to a pickle company. So actually, through a lawsuit, they tracked the barrel all the way back to the building in the lawsuit, which is why we actually found out that it was a Cooperage, because there's like 20 or 25 years of no records of what went on in our buildings for obvious reasons during that time period. So we actually, the address was 214 Pecan, so Cooperage 214. And, but we were kind of called visionaries and crazy all at the same time. But we did a little bit of commercial space on the first floor with the intention of about 3 residential units. And then on the second and the third floor, we had 9 units each. And before we even started construction, we had a tech company come in and actually lease the whole entire first floor. And then we leased up the entire building within 45 days of completion. So it was a huge win.
So is that the definition then of a preservationist, a crazy visionary? It's not bad. I think we should change the Oxford Dictionary to say something like that. Michael, you have a distinct different approach to the impact of preservation as it stands today.
That's true. The approach that I'm at least able to contribute involves myself and my firm in terms of providing litigation and counseling assistance on various matters, whether it be to Landmarks Illinois or the National Trust or other grassroots entities that may face issues with either municipality or even there can be private disputes that can raise issues as well. The involvement that I first had, which occurred in, well, it was a little bit before then, but the big project that ultimately led to the Driehaus Award was in 2000 and really was a crash course in preservation personnel. I had the true, kind of pleasure of meeting Joe for the first time, and Jim Peters and David Ballman, all associated with a building near McCormick Place, where, I'll describe it in a second, but everything that transpired from meetings and discussions with Joe and David and John Vinci and others, all the way from those initial discussions to submissions and grantings of stay before the Illinois Supreme Court and subsequent settlement discussions that involved a tremendous amount of vision with Joe and others. Took about 3 months. A project that could easily take 3 years in a courtroom was basically tried before a judge, appealed and everything in a 3-month period with somebody that really was not nearly as familiar with that area of the law or the politics. But so there was a true crash course, all involving the Platt Luggage Building, which is a beautiful Howard Van Doren Shaw designed building that was used by the Platt Luggage Company and ultimately was taken over by the Metropolitan Pier and Exposition Authority for its offices. Lo and behold, something that we did not realize until just a few days before a lawsuit was filed was that there was a memorandum of agreement between the Illinois Historic Preservation Authority, IDOT, and IDOT to rehabilitate and maintain this beautiful building, which came at a large amount of taxpayer expense, well over $1 million. Apparently, the definition that the Metropolitan Pier and Exposition Authority believed applied to rehabilitation and maintain was the equivalent of demolition, because they immediately decided that the best thing to do with that space was to put a parking lot associated with an expansion of McCormick Place that was being discussed at that time period. Joe, others at Landmarks Illinois had different thoughts. The idea was to move the building at a minimum, and there was space in that part of the south side where there was an ability to do so, and discovery in the case actually revealed that there was a plan in place that we used as a diagram as part of the trial, among other issues, to establish that could be done, and that should be a process where we all went back to the IHPA to have a process where those types of issues could be discussed under what some people may recognize as a Section 106 process. We had a trial, which we lost. We went up on appeal, which we lost 2-1. We went to the Illinois Supreme Court, which granted a stay, which scared quite a few people in the city. And at that time, Jim Peters, who was working with the city at the time, had come up with a fairly ingenious plan of using a part of that building as part of the garage. And lo and behold, when the Illinois Supreme Court says things, people will listen. And Joe had a much more of an audience with Jim and others, and ultimately that plan was put into place. And ultimately, if anybody goes down around 24th Street in Michigan, where the Hyatt Hotel is, if you turn a corner and go a little bit north, you'll see what is like a Howard Van Doren Shaw corridor, where the R.R. Donnelly building that he designed is there, and the Platt Luggage Building, at least a good about 10 feet of it is still there and actually put meticulously in place. I think, Joe, you could tell me if you disagree, but it seems to be in better shape than it was before. Whoever put it back up.
We made a street, you know.
We did.
That's all we're here for. Make beautiful streets with beautiful buildings, and that's why Americans go to Europe, right? To find these beautiful streets, and we've got them here in our own place.
It's a funny way of preservation in that sense, but what we did accomplish quite a bit at the time. I mean, it was before the Farnsworth House was saved, but I did at that point feel, and still feel today, that the ability to credibly, there's a sense of credibility that comes from using the court system, or at least having that threat, and there was a good amount of credibility that the organization had, I believe, through that, as well as establishing standing with some technical things, but they allow that avenue to be out there. And so even to this day, we still work on that and utilize those contacts and strategies in things that we do.
Well, and then with your work after we were able to save the Farnsworth House, just the negotiations with the National Trust that you participated in so ably and donated so many of your hours, thank you very much. You got to work with the National Trust from a different side that we architects normally have to work with them on. And I think your side was even more difficult than ours. So, Gail, you as a practicing architect in Southern Illinois exemplify what Landmarks Illinois is all about. Landmarks Illinois, that we're here and we work in the entire state. But you, for so many years, have waved the flag of preservation in southern Illinois, and for that we're all eternally grateful.
Thank you.
Speak a little bit about, if you could, where preservation stands in southern Illinois and the work that you've been able to achieve.
Thank you, and thank you for the good work that you all have done in the northern part of the state of Chicago. It's always exciting for us to spend some time up here. The beautiful buildings, landmark, properties, state-of-the-art design. So as an architect, we really enjoy and appreciate what you all do. When I was younger, by a considerable number of years, I really, starting out, wasn't sure exactly what aspect of architecture I thought was important or that I wanted to pursue or promote. I had, right after college, gone through a couple of years in Peace Corps in Venezuela, and that was really my first opportunity to become involved in preservation projects.
Where'd you go in the Peace Corps? Where'd they send you?
In Venezuela, in Valencia, the city of Valencia. It's at that time it was about a 700,000 population city. And so I was able to do some town central planning of historic buildings in a couple of communities there. And that sort of, and also to work with some anthropologists doing some development of museum exhibits in 2 or 3 different locations. So that sort of gave me a good introduction. And then when I came back to Southern Illinois, which is my home, originally I had an opportunity to work with a firm that employed an archaeologist and began, cooperating or collaborating on cultural resource projects and then developing historic preservation, historic architectural preservation as an aspect of that. I feel like I'm getting feedback. Is this annoying out there? Okay. So in the late...
It's your resonant voice.
in the late 70s is really when I met Landmarks Preservation Council of Illinois, as it was known in those days. And they came to Southern Illinois for a preservation conference, which was well received, brought good information, was well attended. And then over the years, we maintained relationships with them. Over the years, we have received projects that we have been involved in have received, I think, 6 awards from the Driehaus Foundation. The first one of which was...
You have 6 lanterns?
I do. Well, the original one was a plaster relief.
Oh, that's right.
The
plaster relief. Correct.
Right. The first project was actually in Central Illinois. It was the Normal Theater Restoration Project. And I was so impressed with the commitment and persistence of the town's people, the town government, and the residents of the town to take a building that, as you said, everyone said, wasn't worth preserving or restoring and couldn't be, but through their commitment and persistence, it was restored and is active today. And I think as far as the importance or the impact of the Driehaus Award, the town of Normal is receiving another award for a project that we reviewed back in May that we'll hear about later this evening. So I think the importance of the Driehaus Awards, goes on for many years beyond, maybe the initial award presentation to a community. I think you asked about preservation in Southern Illinois. I think it's different these days than it was, in the 70s and early 80s when I was starting. And in those days, I think, it was something that was not well known, well received, well understood, not well implemented, and that may well have applied to the state of Illinois in general, except for a few locations where there were premier buildings and historic districts established. These days, I think it is much different. That it is sort of mainstreamed, so to speak. Communities do recognize the importance of it. There are local preservation commissions. Developers and realtors do understand and recognize that historic buildings have some significance and economic value. So I think it's a healthier situation now than it was in those days.
One of the wonderful things about the Driehaus Award that I've come to experience over the years is the larger, significant projects that are funded by developers in the urban parts of the state get a lot of recognition. But I am just a fan of the smaller projects, the projects that just average people have gotten behind in the various villages and cities throughout Illinois. And they may have taken 15 years by various volunteer efforts to raise money and save that little farmhouse, or save that little schoolhouse, or save that little bank that is part of their fabric of growing up. And I think that they get faith and encouragement by seeing the Driehaus Award honor other projects in the state just like theirs, and they say, oh my goodness, if that project can get notoriety and get awarded along with all of the other projects, maybe that little project that we have in our cities, in our village, is worth it. And I just think that certainly on Richard's part, is exactly why he has contributed so strongly towards it. And in fact, I think those are more difficult to do than the larger projects.
Absolutely.
One thing I'd like to talk about now is many of the buildings we talk about are now almost 100 years old. The schools, the churches, the old civic centers. And everyone says, well, there's no money, We'll build a new school, leave the school, or take the school down, or the old library, we'll build a new library and leave the old library. But I just see great opportunities, especially with our schools, and especially here in Chicago, where we say we're going to close more schools, this and that, and there's no attendance. What perfect buildings for adaptive reuse. They already have a gymnasium, a swimming pool, a library, administrative space. I mean, couldn't we turn these into better uses, community centers? I mean, you all come from different parts.
Absolutely.
What is your idea about that? Surely in Peoria, you might have a school
absolutely.
or two that's just waiting.
Yeah.
Like, why don't we turn them into community centers, so we turn them back to you could actually walk to a community center just like you walk to your school in the old days.
Absolutely. We have a project that's going on in Peoria right now that I am very excited about. It is the Peoria Public School District has an old school called Greeley School. And I get chills because there is a husband and wife that just purchased the building, and they had to go through a bunch of rezoning for the use. And Jonathan Romaine, and his wife Nikki, who purchased the building, Jonathan had a little rough upbringing, actually ended up going to jail for a couple years, found that he was really good at art, and he became a phenomenal artist, and got out of jail and started actually selling his paintings and his drawings across the nation. And him and his wife purchased the building to turn it into an art center for after-school program for kids in a blighted area, in a low-income area. And not only did Jonathan go there to say, hey, I want to take this beautiful old historical building and repurpose it, but the next thing he's also doing is providing space for nonprofits to locate in that building, and he's teaching them how to become entrepreneurs. He's teaching them how to sell their art across the nation and how to be profitable, so not just be a poor artist. And he's doing all arts. So there's ballet, there's dance, there's basketball. Not basketball. Sorry, in the basketball gym, there's going to be the ballets on the stage. And they're in the process of raising money. I mean, they're going for grants, and their project's not gonna be big enough to make it worthwhile to have the tax credits. But it's those projects in our community that have what I call the ripple effect. It gives people confidence in a neighborhood to invest in that neighborhood. One of the projects we did in Peoria Heights, Trefsker's Bakery, it was about a $4.8 million project. It has now created a ripple effect of $17.5 million in a 3-block radius from it, in a town that had not seen any development in 5 to 6 years. So I'm super excited to see what they do with the Greeley School project.
Well, and I think it's up to government to come up with programs too that make the rehabilitation of these 100-year-old buildings so that we can bring them back for another 100 years. It's to the benefit of all. It's green building. It makes good sense from a green building standpoint, but work within the community. When you're talking about that art center, you have some of these huge old high schools. That could be one segment of the high school. I mean, you could almost have some of the classroom areas as living areas and yet still have the art center and a rec center in the gym and the swimming pool, because we don't build the gyms and the swimming pools like we used to in those old buildings. I'm sure you have a school or two in southern Illinois that could be converted.
We have a lot that could be. We have some that have been, just in our own community in Carbondale. One of the high school campuses now houses the Boys and Girls Club that was formed after that campus was vacated, after a new school campus was constructed in another location in town. So it houses the Boys and Girls Club, and then there's also an alternative basketball program for underprivileged kids in the community that's also housed there. In a neighboring community, there's a group of artists, glass artists, who have taken an elementary school building, not very nice, attractive building from the 20s, and created artist working space in that building. I think maybe a good example for us to look at closer this evening during the awards time is the excuse me, the Manny Jackson Cultural Center in Edwardsville that was an African American school and has been converted to a humanities cultural center. And hopefully we'll be able to learn more about some of the programs that are offered there. But it seems like it's a diverse programming accomplishment and success story that's there, and also a good mixture of public and private and higher education entities coming together to make that possible.
Also, just here now, we've got Boys and Girls Clubs, we've got the Art Center, we've got after-school activities in art and music. Add in senior housing, add in housing for the disadvantaged or single mothers. Heck, we just wrote the program for the rehabilitation of Eisenhower High School. Why don't we go to the mayor with that?
I think I would add one other point.
Not
maybe
bad.
embedded.
That's pretty good. So, Michael, how do we do that? Okay, so we have these great ideas here from the preservationists, the crazy people up here just talking and talking. How do we implement that? I mean, there's so many great ideas out there, and these buildings are now 100 years old. They're so much better than we can build today. The way these beautiful buildings have corners that are just so articulated and all, and the facades, and many of them were built by corporate entities as they were paid for in the various villages and cities. How do we make an impact legally and through government to make them realize that we already have buildings in these communities and in these disadvantaged areas where we have challenges? The facilities are already there. We just need to renovate, bring them back, and staff them.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like a legal perspective, but I would say over the last almost 20 years of time spent on these types of issues, I would say that there's a threefold manner of trying to get these issues to a forefront. And they start, I do think, grassroots. There's a symbiotic relationship between I think the three, but certainly you need community support. You need folks who are there to express and show how much these issues and it's community. We look at it as a piece of pride, but it's how important these are to the community. You need leadership and help from the state level, and you need, I would say, city or state, municipal level, state level. I think that advocacy organizations like Landmarks Illinois add a huge assistance through relationships that are held with not only with the state but with private entities, with the municipal entities, and when you combine and throw in some assistance from a national level as well, I think that you do need a coalescence of those things, and some of that leadership. It's hard to see. Sometimes it comes. I would say most times it comes from the local level, but there are leadership positions. As you know, from the Farnsworth House is a good example where you do need leadership at a certain point, and then it engenders more support at a different point. But you do need those types of things to coalesce. And when they don't coalesce, I do believe strongly that voting in municipal elections is another way to make sure that those things occur, and where you can get more support referendum-wise, or money, or things of that nature. I do see all of that coalescing to ultimately leading to success.
Well, and when we do have individuals who have an organization who want to step forward and preserve these marvelous old buildings that are now some 125 years, these buildings need incredible attention. They essentially have to be rebuilt again. But some of them that are so much part of our urban fabric deserve it. A great example is the Holly Clark House up in Evanston. I mean, they had an opportunity there with a person who was willing to renovate the whole building and keep all of the property in the public domain, and that opportunity was lost, and now we are threatened with losing that building. But the cost of renovation of an ornate building like that is just so huge. When we have those opportunities of someone stepping forth, we as a preservation community have to stand up and give that person our support, because that's the only way we're going to change things. And so when I'm chained to the doors of that building, when they bring the wrecking ball, did I go on record as saying I do that?
You did.
Yeah, did I?
To add to your point too, when you talk about legislators, we're very blessed in Peoria to have a lot of state and national legislators in our community, and I think it's also, they're not developers, and they're not architects, and they're not attorneys.
That's right.
And we have to remember that, because we have some great legislators. I mean, Jahan Gordon Booth's here tonight, going to be awarded an award, and she gets into our community, and she just understands the problem, and she really fights for it. And I think that if we have more legislators like her, who's actually understanding the problem, and we as a community also take the time to educate them, because a lot of times they just don't know. And so letting them walk through the buildings and letting them understand, like, we invested this much and this is the ripple effect. We need to do our job as the community too, to let them know the positive impact that it's having on the community.
Well, and I've got to compliment Landmarks Illinois, because I think for years we've actually led by example. Architects have donated their time to make a few plans, not a lot, but enough so that they can make a couple of renderings, and we've been able to then get some structural engineers to donate a little time, and a general contractor to donate a little time, and pretty soon you can put together a pro forma and show how this actually may work. And I think, Michael, you've been very helpful with that. And many of the buildings, like Cook County Hospital, the old post office, who would have thought that these two huge buildings that, ideal for the wrecking ball, are now going to come back and house such have such fabulous accommodations in neighborhoods and in parts of our city that are so impactful.
It's education in a lot of different ways. When you're able to put those types of things together, you're educating legislators, you're educating the community, you're educating potential donors, but that education element is so important, I think. A lot of things we talk about do boil down to that.
Yeah. Well, and I think every city, every village through our great state has the equivalent. New York had Ellis Island. We had Old Cook County Hospital. It never turned anybody away. Never, ever did it turn anyone away. And it's not so, okay, it's a beautiful old building, but what actually happened there was as important as the building itself, and that's something that needs to remain in our communities forever. And I think you can go back to each of your cities and you say, that building there, that defines Carbondale, or that defines Peoria, not just the great basketball players that came out of Peoria. It could be said that the very best basketball player ever in Illinois came out of Peoria. Is that right?
Who would you say that is?
Mr. Livingston, who plays on
Sean Livingston, absolutely.
on the Golden State. Maybe there's some different ideas about who was the best basketball player.
Well, I think
they're all saying, "What is he talking about?" But
well, I think it also goes to the true character, which is a lot what you talk about with older buildings. And Sean has an amazing character, and he gives so much back to our community. And
he is
amazing,
and can have. And we shouldn't fail to call upon people like that, because here's a young man, I think, grew up with a single mom, I think, in Peoria. And if it wasn't for a bad knee, would have really been just a superstar. But him coming back, and let's just say his old high school was now not used, but you're interested in redoing it. Having that person champion the cause and make that into a community center and make it the viable place that it should be within the community is a way in which we can. That's a great idea, in fact. Would you get his autograph for me?
I can get his autograph for it. Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
Well,
at least for my son.
I'll get it for your son.
My grandson in San Francisco. That would be a great thing to have.
Well, last year, one of the representatives from the Driehaus said something that has stuck with me the whole year, and it's like remembering where we've been encourages and empowers us where we are going to go. And it makes me think not only of historical structures in that way, but really in the character of our community. Like you said, these buildings they're a fabric of our community. I mean, people fought to get them built and did that. And how do we recreate them to create unique experiences in our community, to rebrand them and get them to the next generation?
Absolutely, and ironically, I'm working with a developer now. I guess I'm allowed to say it, right? Hines, who is interested in building mid-rise wood buildings, and I'm going, what? You're the most successful high-rise developer in the world, but now you want to come back and in our cities build wood high-rise buildings. Now they've done two of these, one in Minneapolis and one in Atlanta. They say, all you have to do is walk the tenant through the space, and it's a slam dunk. And, when you go through all of the repurposed old mill buildings, and certainly the ones now that are in the West Loop and in near North, they're all renting up just like crazy. They're the hottest thing for high-tech companies to have as their offices. So here we have people emulating this old building type from the 1920s. What does that tell you? Maybe we should restore the buildings we have from 1920. So it's interesting how it's come the full cycle. Are there any other building types that you see within your communities that are sitting there and perhaps not right now? We in Chicago had the Motor Road District of Chicago sitting for the longest time. It was on everyone's most threatened list. And now all of a sudden, blink twice and it's going to become one of the hottest areas in the city. So patience, and planning pays off. Are there elements like that you see within your communities or near communities that perhaps we should be addressing and landmarking and taking care
of? We have the warehouse district in Peoria, and it was, again, with Hiram Walker and some of the whiskey barons that lived in Peoria back in the day. And our warehouse district, where like a lot of downtown main streets and like the center squares are very condensed, our warehouse district is many, many blocks. It's probably about like 12 or 15 blocks. So it's really spread out. And we've had roughly about $32 to $35 million worth of development in there in the last 3 years. And you're just starting to feel it. And so those areas where people think that it's, they're blighted areas or we should knock them down and have the wrecking ball, we have had over like 250, I think, people right now that have moved down into the district. We're working on a project called The Block, where it's taking 5 buildings that are connected, and you'll love this. There's no opening to the exterior of the building that has the same elevation. So, so anytime our engineer has to keep coming back out to get the elevations correct. But though they're tough buildings to recreate, which I think also then spawn the most creativity that comes. And we actually have, we're in construction right now for the first phase, and the whole development's 75% leased. So people want those experience. They want something new. I always say it's easy to build new, but it's hard to go into an existing structure and really work with what you have and create the experience. And I think those communities that can do that are going to be the hotbed for like the weekend tourist communities and, coming down for people to want to come to their cities. So I think it's going to be a big tourist.
Gail, what do you think?
Well, I think our situation is a little different because our towns are so small, in comparison, that we just don't have the population base to fuel the economy. So, in Carbondale specifically, the university and the medical community are the two economic engines. They've both had a significant, heavy impact on historic buildings over the years as the campuses, academic and medical, have expanded. We've lost a lot of buildings that would be considered historic. I think, kind of thinking about many of the other small towns throughout southern Illinois, churches is one of the most challenging building types that I see at the moment because we're losing population in those small towns. Those congregations are reducing in size and hence in economic resources. I recently, unfortunately, helped with sort of the obituary aspect of a church. It was in a rural setting in southern Illinois that just lost its congregation, and in the process of that, the building deteriorated to the point that the half dozen people who remained, couldn't financially, support the repairs that were needed to the building. And so, unfortunately, it was demolished a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to be working with the remaining group to design a memorial to it. But a number of substantial buildings, church buildings throughout southern Illinois, have just, their congregations have dwindled and left, and what can be done with those generally large edifices that many of them need quite a bit of repair work, and given the small population and trying to find the right need, the right fit for those buildings in terms of a function, a repurposing of them, and then to be able to support that function with the rehabilitation or restoration that's needed. It's a challenge. I don't think that's answering your question exactly, but no. I don't know that we have a specific, we don't have large warehouse districts with a need for housing to go in or for a multi-use kind of facility. So our situation is a little bit different in that regard.
Michael, any comments?
I do agree that schools and churches should be paid particular attention as we move forward. But one other thing here in the city anyway that I do think about and have seen that I think should be taken into account is issues of, I don't know the best way to describe it, but displacement questions. When neighborhoods gentrify, for example, many may be familiar with what's referred to as the 606 that runs from Wicker Park into Avondale, basically. And it's a beautiful trail. It runs it's about 5 miles, 2.7 miles one way and 2.7 another. The issues, it has been successful to the point where I think the neighborhoods have gotten surrounding it have become very desirable, and that will have an impact on what goes on with those properties, because some of those neighborhoods have some very beautiful older properties, not all of which have been well maintained, and so there are going to be questions about what's going to occur with them. I think that that same type of phenomenon may well occur in Kenwood and Woodlawn as issues surrounding the Obama Presidential Center are further explored and discussed, and the impact in that area as well. So I do think that those are the issue is broad, but I think those are two areas where those types of issues one needs to be sensitive to.
Ron, I think the 606, that was on an old railway bed, correct?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
the repurposing of these old railway beds is just happening all over. I mean, Minneapolis is unbelievable, the way they've taken over all of the abandoned railroad tracks, and they've turned them into jogging tracks and bicycling, and now all of a sudden they have, one of the, I think the first or second or third most bicycle paths in the entire nation, which I think railroads, some of these old railroad stations too, not so much, well, I guess so much at the big cities too, because you see what the plan is for Union Station here in Chicago, and you look at this marvelous announcement just a couple of weeks ago about what Ford's going to do with the old station in Detroit, take over the 18-story building above the terminal, renovate the whole old terminal, and turn it into their new corporate campus for innovative research of electric cars and alternate energy. So what a great civic corporate endeavor that is. But when I travel and I see what's happening in smaller towns where the old railway station was perhaps abandoned, and maybe there are some canopies that go out where the trains were stored or whatever, and you see places like that are restored and they're office space, and then suddenly the farmer's market takes place under the shelter of the covers of where the trains were held. These are all other opportunities when you look at the high schools, you look at the churches, you look at the libraries, you look at the town centers, you look at the railroads. These facilities, my wife's from Hibbing, Minnesota, and U.S. Steel built all of those, back in the 1920s. They just didn't build them. They had the finest New York architects come and design the high school, which had that's how Bob Dylan came from there. So it had to be good. But the school is just fantastic, and even today it's just marvelous. So some of the corporate investment that was made 100 years ago, we've got to not let that slip away. We've got to take those buildings and ensure that they last for another 100 years. And I think I was lucky enough to be honored at the Driehaus Museum and the Murphy Auditorium. And Richard paid for those buildings to be totally rehabilitated and brought back now for another 100, 200 years by the changing of all of the plumbing, the wiring, everything. It all looks the same, and people say, well, what did you do, Joe? I said, well, I changed the exit signs. I designed a new exit sign. It was my design thing. Oh, and the return air grill on the third floor. That was really, but you couldn't, you're governed by the Chicago Landmark Ordinance too. But what a great example of being able to bring those buildings back, a steward of those buildings now for another 100, 200 years. That's really what I think we're all talking about, these wonderful buildings in communities that we have. Before we just all talk, are there any questions that people out in the audience would like us to chat about, or anybody have something that stand up and say? Yes.
I think that the Driehaus Award is a perfect example of how successful those individuals are, based on commitment, based on time, intellect, all those different things that that a grassroots effort, that a successful grassroots effort is made of. So I don't know that being well steeped in the issues versus not is as important as really just being committed to the projects and being able to communicate with those around you and following through and gaining credibility, which is such an important issue for, I mean, no matter whether you're at the grassroots level or beyond. So I think that it is, it's certainly, it's a good experience for me, but I don't think that changes ultimately the results of what transpires as long as there's the commitment and work that's put in.
And can I add something to that too? I think a lot of us that have gotten into preservation either have accidentally gotten into it or have been kind of pulled into it, our first project. Usually that's kind of the stories I hear. And once you do a preservation project, you want to help other people understand that. So, I mean, thank you for helping a rookie out, getting a connection, you know, to get them to that next level, because that's really what it's about. I mean, that's really what our community, saving our buildings and saving our history is really about. And that was one of my struggles at first is who knows this stuff? Who do I talk to? You know, and thankfully we do have Landmarks Illinois to be able to make those connections, and they're a great resource. I mean, Bonnie is always connecting me with anybody. I have a little bit of a problem. Oh, you should go talk to, you know, you should go talk to Joe, or you should go talk to Bob. I mean, so make sure that you also leverage Landmarks too, because like I said, everybody who has done a project always wants to help and give back because they know all the scars that they've incurred in going through the projects.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point, and you know, you can go back and look at other examples. Dare I say the Lucas Museum? I mean, golly, talk about everybody who was behind that. But I think when you just looked at the building, it just was the wrong building at the wrong place at the wrong time, and it took a bit of work, but I think everyone came to the same conclusion there. I'm sorry that another location wasn't found in the city, but that's a whole different story. But any other questions or thoughts? Thank you, Kim. And for those, I think you all know Kim, who's the director of the Driehaus Foundation, and she's, that's a great question, especially coming from you. I'm going to just answer that for a project that we won award for, the old Skokie Swift, the little, I mean, everybody, you know, they'd ride in on the Skokie Swift and they'd sit in that ugly building, and all you had to do was take the old pictures and look at the old pictures and say, well, hold it, wait, there's some bones here that are pretty nice. And so we moved the building and turned it into a commercial operation and made it just like it was. And in that whole community, that community had no idea that building existed like that. But the Driehaus Award, certainly in that community and in Lincolnwood, got a lot of notoriety and really made, I think, a lot of people, certainly in Skokie and Lincolnwood, very aware of the project and what preservation means. So I think we all have our own experiences with that.
Yeah, really winning the Driehaus Award was really an amazing experience. To come here and honestly, when last year, the Chicago Housing Authority won, and I remember sitting in the back, because our, one of the projects we had was Tresker's Bakery, which had like a 7 financial stack, which means there's 7 financial entities. So if you equate it to like buying a house, like an 80-20 loan, you have 2. We had 7. So if you think if one goes wrong, you have to go back and ask all the other 6, is this okay? And they had like 17. And I was amazingly floored. And I kind of cornered the head of Chicago Housing. I'm like, how'd you do it? You know, and he was great to share. And I think that's really goes to the strength of the network here, and also the award winners here, that they still, again, want to share and want to give back. For myself, I can say it gave that, like you said, the credibility. You know, once you've done it, once you've been, you know, crazy, and then people know you're very tenacious. That's what I've been labeled a lot, is being very tenacious and not letting projects die. You get the credibility and you get people wanting to support you. So when you have that next project come online, it doesn't seem like it's not going to happen, because they've seen it happen in the community. They've seen the projects go to completion. So, you know, we've done Trefsker's Bakery now, which was a family-owned bakery from 1861, and they wanted to go into a building that represented their brand, and so we got into a building that's 1895, and I told Jeff we're close enough. And you know, that's the building that now has created about $17.5 million of development, and we're working on, like I said, the block development there with some young investors, and that's, again, having the experience and the confidence of the community behind you. You can start to really push the envelope. So that project was all local, smaller investors that normally would not be able to participate in that project, and it was really near and dear to our hearts to get some of the young professionals in the community to invest in the deal and really take ownership. And it's just really gone crazy on that. I mean, we have people calling and want to walk through all the time.
Yeah.
We're also working on the former IDOT headquarters building, and I think, again, the credibility of the Driehaus Award, we would not be sitting at the table if it wasn't for that.
Involving the award, bringing the attention of younger entrepreneurs to the attention of younger entrepreneurs is really something that does happen.
Well, I think the significance of the Driehaus awards is something that's hard to really quantify in terms of the impact that it has. But I can tell you that in some of the projects, like in the Rose Hotel in Elizabethtown, or the Lock and Dam 51 properties in Golconda that are both on the Ohio River, the Driehaus Award, recognizing those projects is probably one of the biggest things that's happened in those towns. And the Driehaus Award is known now. We have, I'm not good at, I guess, in our marketing or promoting ourselves, making a big deal of the Driehaus Awards, except that we do put the Driehaus Award on any of our promotional literature going out on a project that we're pursuing, or that we just keep a record of. But I think it does, maybe more to your question, it does help us when we go after projects farther out of our area. And probably the project that our firm did that probably more people might be familiar with would be the Union Station restoration project in Springfield, which was an award recipient a few years ago.
Beautiful project.
Thank you. And I think being recognized by the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency to be a client of ours, or for us to be entrusted with a property of that significance and importance to not only the city of Springfield, but to the state of Illinois. I think certainly having the Driehaus track record on other projects behind us does pay back to us, significantly.
Michael, any final words?
I think that the awards are a great recognition of so much effort that goes through the state at all levels, whether they be for architects, whether they be at the grassroots level, and I do see and appreciate those grassroots projects, because I do so strongly believe in those. But I think it truly does provide. I don't think it's done for the award itself, but I do think it's a great reward, and I do think that when those awards are made, that they do have impacts on the communities, that people that receive them, the entities that receive them, and the communities that are part of them.
And the pride, what you said, the community, I mean, the workforce, all the guys
Absolutely.
who work on the projects.
Yes.
I mean, to see them, because Bonnie came down and we did an award ceremony locally for Cooperage, And, to see the trades guys there just beaming, and smiling ear to ear of like being really recognized for their hard work as well, which was great.
Well, and every dollar that's spent in the construction and rehabilitation is spent 6 times over in the community. So the economic impact of these projects is enormous.
I should also say that the award itself, I know it has evolved over time, but the one that we received has the light that goes on, and my kids have all enjoyed flipping that light on and off, so that is an additional benefit.
Mine's endured my grandchildren, as they've grown up, they want to play with that thing, so it's...
Ours actually, we did Hasbani giving the award. Like, there's a
video?
An audio.
Oh, no.
With it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That is one of the most horrifying parts.
This must mean that time's up. Have we gone over or
You
under?
are right on time.
Are we
folks.
right
Would
on time?
Please join me in thanking Michael Rachlis, Gail White, Katie Kim, and our moderator, Joe Antunovich, for a wonderful discussion. And I have an anecdote, which is to Kim's question about the impact of the awards. I have the pleasure of traveling around the state with Frank Butterfield, the director of our Springfield office, and we went to visit Gail White. And I can tell you, you walk into his office, and immediately there is a wall full of Driehaus awards there. And in fact, he is our archive because he has every award that has been designed. So I just wanted to say that we're so proud to have them on the stage tonight, all of them, and we thank them again.